Today I'm going to be talking about the Great Revolt, what led to it, and what led to the ultimate destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, or the Holy Temple. And so I want to say that most of my material comes from two big sources. One is Josephus, and I got a lot of material from there. I find his work fascinating. And the other one, which I give a lot of credit to, is Gershom Bar Kochba and Aaron Horowitz's book on what happened, the battle. And it really is quite helpful in understanding the whole battle. Okay, so I will now begin. Okay. In the Hebrew month of Av, in the year 70, the year 3830, the Hebrew calendar, the Roman forces under Titus burned the temple, destroyed Jerusalem, and slaughtered its inhabitants. This was in response to a massive rebellion by a people who rose up to claim their national and religious freedom. It's called the Great Rebellion. It was a fight for the Jewish nation's desire for liberty and its national religious pride, and to be a response to the insulting Roman behavior towards the temple, towards God, and the Jewish people. It was revolt by people of all levels of society, and the people were motivated. To rebel on three different levels: political, social, socioeconomic, and religious messianic. Unfortunately and tragically, they were unable to unite internally against an external enemy. Due to rival factions bickering over the true meaning of being God's chosen people and how to best express it through the temple worship, the masses were unable to unite in battle against Rome. Thank you. Okay, stop. Okay. Every year during the 3 weeks leading up to Tisha, the 9th of Av, we, the Jewish people, recall the destruction of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. The collective Jewish memory is preserved in the words of Kamtza Bar Kamtza, which is mentioned in the Masechta Gittin. It's a reference to a party where the host realizes that the wrong person was invited. Instead of inviting Kamtza, Bar Kamtza was invited. And apparently Bar Kamtza was the host's arch enemy. And the Talmud tells of this event and how the host and how this publicly humiliated guest dealt with the events, and what finally resulted in the greater Roman oppression. Basically, the guest Bar Kamtza comes, and the host sees him and says, "Get rid of him. He shouldn't be here at all." And Bar Kamtza is embarrassed, and he says, "You know, I'll pay for my food." And the host says, "No, not interested." And he says, "Okay, I'll pay for half the food of the party." And the guest says, "No." He says, "Okay, I'll pay for the entire party. Just don't embarrass me like this." And of course, he does. He gets kicked out, and he's so humiliated, and he blames his humiliation not just on the host, but he blames his humiliation also on the rabbis who were at the party, because they didn't interfere and stop the public humiliation. So what does Bar Kamtza do? Bar Kamtza goes to, he decides that he's going to cause trouble for them. So he goes to the Romans and he says, "You should know that the Jews are planning a rebellion against the Romans." And the Roman authority says, "Well, how can we find out if that's correct?" And so Bar Kamtza says, "Why don't you take a korban, a sacrifice, give a sacrifice for the well-being of the emperor and the empire, and see what happens. And if they accept it, then there's no rebellion. But if they don't accept it, you'll know that there's a rebellion going on." So the Roman authority says, "Okay, fine, go do that for us." So Bar Kamtza is commissioned to take a animal over to the Beit HaMikdash on behalf of the empire. So on his way over there, he gives it a nick, a mum, a blemish, either in the upper lip or in the white of the eye. Now, this is something that an average person wouldn't notice, certainly not pagans, but the priests would notice it. And an animal that has a blemish is not allowed to be sacrificed. So he brings it to them on behalf of the empire, and they look at it and they say, wait a second, it has a blemish. And so now there's a big discussion. Should we sacrifice this animal anyway in order so that there will reduce the conflict, the tensions between us and the Romans? Or should we say it has a blemish and we're not allowed to sacrifice animals with blemishes? And they did, and there's a Rabbi Avtalus who says, I'm sorry, I forgot his first name. Anyway, so he says, no, you can't sacrifice it. You can't. This sacrifice is forbidden. It has a mum, and if you sacrifice it, then everybody's going to start saying we can start sacrificing animals with blemishes. And so okay, so they said no. And of course, the problem is that the Roman authorities were insulted, and because the sacrifice wasn't accepted, and it said, the Gemara says that this is the reason why that the destruction of the temple due to baseless hatred is what destroyed the holy temple. So the Talmud's reference to Kamtza Bar Kamtza reveals a much deeper ailment in the Jewish people. It's at a time when there were so many different political parties, all vying for the leadership of the Jewish people. These rifts ran deep with tremendous jealousy and hatred between the groups. This is the backdrop of scenario that is occurring while the Roman army comes to put out the Great Rebellion. Josephus also places a great deal of the blame at the foot of the Jews. He also does it, indicating that it was the quarreling amidst one another that caused for the destruction. As Josephus claims, when Vespasian was being encouraged by his soldiers to hurry up and put out the rebellion before the enemy entrenches itself, he says, God acts as a general for the Romans better than I can, and is giving the Jews up to us without any pains. It is best to sit still as spectators and watch while our enemies destroy each other with their own hands. So that's says a lot. Okay, so oops, wait a second. Okay, so we have two areas of major friction, that between the Jews and the Romans. And the one aspect is between the Jews and the Romans, and the other is the infighting and the rifts that are occurring within the Jewish parties. And both of these forces led to the ultimate destruction of the temple. So when looking at events in history, we could study a specific event and limit our focus to just at that event. Like if you're looking at this picture, you're only looking at the girl with a book on her head, but it's not giving us really the whole picture of what's going on. And that's what we have to do. We don't want to limit our appreciation of why the punishment by the Romans was so extreme, to just destroying the Holy Temple, which was seen throughout the entire empire as an extreme measure. So I want to tease out a little bit as to, oops, one second. Okay, here we go. I want to tease out a little bit the aspects in greater detail. First, we're going to focus on the external pressure of the empire. We know that the empire had the most powerful force in the world, and it comes to besiege one of the best fortified and one of the most glorious cities in the east. The Romans come to wage an obstinate and fierce battle against the Jews. The Jews were a local population, no standing army, and yet the Romans lost thousands of their soldiers in the process. But a peek at the history shows that this great rebellion wasn't the first time the Jews of Judea resisted and rebelled against the great Roman Empire. Even Titus, in his remarks to the surviving rebels in the upper city, already as the temple is burning, he says, "You who were the first, ever since Pompey reduced you by force, never ceased from revolting, and have now ended by declaring open war upon Rome." We see from Titus's response, and he knew the history, that the Jews were rebelling ever since Pompey came into the scene. That's 130 years that the Jews have been rebelling. As an aside, we can recall the Hasmonean War. And we see that the Hasmonean War started in 163 BC against the Greek Empire, and it went on for 25 years. So it was over in 138. Now Pompey arrives in 63. That means that the Jews had 75 years of independence. That's a lot of time. That's something we can get used to. 75 years of independence. So one Pompey comes and conquers the Hasmonean kingdom. The Jews of Judea lost their sovereignty. They pay, excuse me, they had to pay heavy taxes. And when Pompey enters into the Holy Temple, they feel a huge communal insult to God and to their religious beliefs. So, so we have Pompey coming in 63. And then in 54, the Roman authority begins robbing the treasury. When the Jews try to stop this offensive act, 13,000 Jews are killed and 30,000 are taken into slavery. Along with this came the loss of Jewish control over foreign lands. In 45 BCE, a special tax was levied on the Jews. Food and equipment were confiscated for the use of the Roman army, and those who protested were punished. They had 4 entire cities were enslaved: Gophna, Emmaus, Lydia, and Timna. So also, Herod the Great had established 3 pagan temples, Banyas, Caesarea, and Sebastia, thus endorsing idol worship. He also killed Mattatyahu Antigonus, who was a leader of a rebellion, another rebellion that was seeking independence for the Jews. We also have that Herod placed a Roman golden eagle on one of the temple gates. So in the sense, Herod was helping inflame these feelings of a need of a desire to rebel, feelings of hatred, the feelings of hatred that the Jews would have against Rome and also Herod. In response to what Herod did, 40 people, students, yeshiva students, tried to remove the golden eagle from the gate, and they were met with severe punishment. They were burnt alive. We think that this occurred around 4 BCE because there was a trial, and just at the trial was in Jericho, and Herod, according to Josephus, Herod could barely stand by, or couldn't stand by himself. I'm not sure exactly what, which means it was close to death. Anyway, so Herod's son Archelaus is now the ruler, and he attempts to calm the people because the masses are so angry, they're so furious that the people who burnt those 40 were not punished properly, and he's trying to calm the masses, but he gets annoyed that they're not being calmed down, so he orders the Roman army to put the demonstration to rest, and in the end 3,000 Jews are killed from that. Okay, here we go. All right, and in 6 CE, let's go back, okay. In 6 CE, Archelaus is now deposed, and Augustus Caesar places Judea directly under the Roman rule, making it a Roman province. And this creates a polarization within the Jewish community in Judea, with the upper classes tending to collaborate with Rome. This enables them to become even more wealthy and more powerful. This was a time when the high priests were politically appointed. So we have increase of taxation, and corrupt politics leads to an economic depression and an insult to religious values. There was a heightened tension also between Jew and non-Jew as well. In certain areas, like in Egypt, some of the non-Jews were exempt from paying the same taxes that the Jews had to pay. Or some wealthy Jews who were part of the Roman administration were exempt from paying taxes. And this added division, this added to the divisiveness and disharmony amongst the people. Prefect Pontius Pilatus, 26 to 36, right? He orders a statue of Caesar and golden shields to be installed in Jerusalem. I'm not sure what the results of that were. In 40, Caligula, the emperor, he orders a huge statue of himself as Zeus, and it's to be put into the Beit HaMikdash, and it should be called the new temple of Gaius Zeus Epiphanes. And this actually was one event that actually created unity, because everybody was in an uproar about it. All the Jews were in uproar. Fortunately, though, Caligula dies before the order was carried out, and it was void. So we can see that the rebellion in 66 was not the first time that the Jews aggressively went up against the Romans, but perhaps we can better understand why this particular rebellion that officially starts in the 66 was called the Great Rebellion. And now I'm going to focus on Jerusalem, specifically on that time period. But before I discuss the rebellion, I want to take a moment to compare Jerusalem today to Jerusalem of the late Second Temple period. Jerusalem of today is just the old city. We're not talking about the new city. The old city was not even a kilometer in square kilometers, 0.9 square kilometers in size, or 0.35 square miles, if that's easier. And the walls are the average height of 12 meters in high, almost 40 feet. And their walls go around 2.5 miles length. And the 34 watchtowers and gates, including the most recent gate opened. And our current population, from what I understand, in the old city is about 37,000 people. Okay, now if we compare that to Jerusalem from 2,000 years ago, and at the end of the Second Temple period, true, when Jerusalem first started, it began as a small temple city, but it grew into a sprawling metropolis, twice the size of today's present-day old city. Jerusalem at that time, in the 66, was 1.8 square kilometers, or 450 acres, twice the size. It included Ir David, it included Har Zion, extended way beyond Damascus Gate. At that time, there was a population of 80,000 people. The Beit HaMikdash was 50 meters high, sitting on a platform that was already 30 meters up high, elevated from the street. North of the temple, of course, was the Antonia Fortress with its 4 impressive towers. And then, of course, there was Struthian Pool was used as a moat. Okay, wait a second. And let's go back to what Josephus says. Whoever controlled the temple controlled the city, and whoever controlled the Antonia Fortress controlled the temple. And during the Great Revolt, the Antonia Fortress became the rebels' most strategic position. In addition, there are also the 3 walls that surrounded Jerusalem and 160 or more watchtowers. So, yeah. So Jerusalem was a magnificent city. And its greatest allure was its spiritual significance, the arena where the relationship between man and God played out in a physical manner. Okay. It's the place where man and God interfaced, in a sense. The temple was the gateway to heaven, and its central focus for all Jews. The temple's goal was to create unity. The festivals where everybody came together. You had the rich and the poor. You had the aristocrats and the common folk. You had everybody coming together. It was an ideal situation. And it says it in Chagiga. It was a city that made friends. Okay, very nice. It was a destination not just for Jewish worshipers, but also for pagans who were seeking to experience a physical and spiritual beauty. Intrigued by the idea of in the Jewish faith, the idea of worshiping one God who that you can't see, and that ruled over heaven and earth and governed the destiny of man, that just intrigued them. So it was a temple that drew all different types of people together, people from all over the place. And people would come and offer sacrifices, paying a half a shekel tax, purchasing the sacrifices, purchasing gifts, making donations. There was so much money, and most of the most money in all of Judea was located here in Jerusalem, and most of it was held by the temple treasury. The money was collected at the temple, used to improve the city structure and to accommodate the growing number of pilgrims. So, again, it's another one. And the streets were paved, the marketplaces built, the lodgings, the mikvot, reservoirs. Jerusalem, the Jerusalem that was lost to us was really quite a magnificent place. It was one of the largest and most beautiful cities in the world, prosperous. And some said it was the apple of the Roman man's eyes. So here we have, he who has not seen Jerusalem in its glory has not seen a beautiful city in his lifetime. Jerusalem is the most illustrious city in the East. That was by Pliny. He who has not seen the temple built up has not seen a magnificent building in his life. So how did this inner quarreling amongst the various Jewish factions play out to result in such a horrific misfortune that we lose the center, our heart, the Holy Temple? And let's see, wait a second. Oh, one more one I forgot I wanted to add to you, but okay. Just by Josephus talking about how gorgeous the temple was. And to strangers as they approached in the distance, it looked covered with snow. For any part covered with gold was dazzling white. Okay. So there was a deep chasm in Jewish society. Arguments that became bitter hostilities burst forth. Essenes, Sadducees, Sadducees, Pharisees, Perushim, priestly families, zealots, the Sicarii, they all fought over what is the true meaning of God, and what is it not of God? What is the true meaning of being God's chosen people? And how should that be expressed in the temple worship? Josephus describes the division of the Jewish society into basically four general groups. You have the Essenes, Sadducees, Pharisees, and the Zealots. And each of these groups had a particular philosophy in how to best lead the people during oppressive times when they're under foreign governments. And within each group is a subgroup. So let me just go through them real fast. You have the Sadducees, the Sadducees, who came from respected priestly families. They were members of the aristocracy and leadership, wealth, well-connected, held key positions in government. Their ideology was basically conservative and strict concerning the performance of commandments. They didn't believe in the oral law, reward or punishment, resurrection of the dead, or in immortality of the soul. So they had a different that plays effect on how you're going to do your Judaism, I guess. They also believed that the priests were guardians of sanctity. They received support and respect solely because of the existence of the temple. During the last years prior to the Churban, they did all they could to prevent the rebellion, and they tried to make compromises with the Roman regimes. As the situation got worse, their moderate policies were seen not only as useless, but also as harmful to those who wanted national and religious freedom. And some of them were assassinated by their opponents in an effort that another person would take over who would have a more extremist outlook. And some of these individuals, one individual I'll be mentioning, it was Hanan ben Hanan or Anias ben Ananis. Wait a second, sorry about that. The Essenes is another group, and the Essenes were a separatist, and they were, many of them were scholars, and they decided that they were going to identify with the Judean sect living out in Qumran. So this group is described in so many different writings. Pliny the Elder, who's a Roman historian, describes them, and Philo of Alexandria describes them, and Josephus describes them. Josephus actually uses a lot of ink to talk about the virtues of this group, and apparently he really admired how they shunned pleasures and strove to control their passions. Despite living in an insular world, they keeping to themselves and having a unique calendar and a unique way of life, a number of them did participate in the Great Rebellion, and according to Josephus, many of them were tortured to death by the Romans during the revolt. Okay, the next group are the Pharisees, and this seems to be a group that most of the Jews at that time identified with. People came across, people were from all different social and economic spectrums in this group. You had priests, you had the wealthy, you had farmers, you had the poor, craftsmen, merchants, converts, all different groups. They didn't take a specific pride in their wealth or family pedigree. They dressed like ordinary people. They made their living like all other ordinary people did. Josephus says the Pharisees were considered the most accurate interpreters of the laws of Torah, and they tried to cultivate harmonious relations with the community. Beit Hillel would be considered moderate of the Perushim of the Pharisees, and Beit Shammai would be considered more restrictive. The Zealots emerged, many of them emerged from the stricter house of Beit Shammai. And finally, the Zealots. This group were basically from the Perushim school of thought, except they had a passion for liberty. They believed that God alone is their leader and master, and they were ready to submit to death or kill a fellow Jew if it meant to ensure that no man is master over another one. They elevated the concept of political freedom to that of a religious principle. They thought political liberation, they thought is necessary, and they strove for political liberation and social economic freedom or justice. Wait a second, sorry. One action that received a great deal of support from the poor people was when they, I'll tell you later, was when they burnt municipal archives, and that included like banknotes, promissory notes, and that was a major win that the poor people really appreciated. Anyway, Josephus called the Sicarii called a group of people in this Sikari due to a small dagger that they hid under their clothes and would use to assassinate their political enemies. Menachem ben Yehuda, who I'm going to talk to you about, was one of these, and Elazar ben Hananiah, who was the son of the high priest, was also a member of this group. So, but it's interesting because from the way I understand it, there doesn't really seem to be much of an ideological difference between the Zealots and the Sikari or other smaller factions. But the historical writings show that each of them were very, very suspicious of the other. There were major power struggles going on, and there were major attacks on people and property between themselves. And that's where the demise occurred. The infighting that took the focus away from the common enemy, that of the Roman army. It was only when the Romans broke through they were able to unite, but by then it was already too late. And it's unfortunate that they didn't have a singular ruler to unify them. But if you're thinking like, wait a second, here I am telling you that we have all these different groups and we have a lot of infighting, and they're fighting to go against the Romans. But I just told you that the Jews don't have a standing army, and the Romans were the best army in the world. What were those Jews thinking about? So we remember Echarava, and it says, "A burnt temple have you burned, ground flour have you ground," which means that after the Jews had laid waste to the essence of the temple, the internal spiritual essence of it, the enemy just had to destroy the shell, so that we had already destroyed much of it already. Anyway, so, okay, let's begin the study now. In the year 66, Florus becomes the procurator, a treasury official holding a Roman of the Roman Empire. And he's to be the last governor over Judea, basically. He's holding this position from 64 to 66. He was notorious for his cruelty, and he was deeply resented and hated by the Jews. Florus burdened the Jews of Judea with heavy taxes, and he used non-Jews frequently to put out the Jewish rebellion, and thus dividing allegiances between the local people. He was reported to be heavy-handed in exacting punishments, and he would punish people by whipping them and crucifying them. He also did that to moderates as well. When he would support a Jewish cause, it was mostly because it was a Jewish act that was done treacherously, and he was going to get something out of it. For example, he protected the Sikari because they had agreed to share their plunder with him. During his administration, towns were ransacked and destroyed, and he took off when he was in Caesarea. He favored the Greeks living there, and there was one event that talked about how one day the Jews go to their synagogue 3 times a day, and one day a pagan Greek sets up a little altar right on the doorstep of the synagogue, and he's sacrificing birds there, and they want to move him, but he won't leave. And so the 12 upstanding representatives of the Jewish community with a bag of money go to Florus to beg him to intervene and to remove this man from their property. And Florus takes their money and he throws them in jail. This caused a lot of feelings of animosity, that he doesn't understand them, and he's totally against their religion, and there's protests going on. Florus goes to Jerusalem And seeing the protest, he demands from the temple treasury 17 talents. I'm not sure how much money that is, but 17 talents. And the priest refused. We're not going to give this to you. And Flores gets so upset, and he leaves, and he's infuriated. He's just so infuriated by this. And the people start mocking him. The people start, Josephus talks about how somebody starts walking around with a hat, like a baker's hat turned upside down, and saying, I'm Flores, I need money. And Flores is so ticked off by all of this that he tells and he sees the massive demonstrations going on. He tells the soldiers, put out the demonstration. And he gives a silent nod. And not only do they attack the upper marketplace and turn everything over, but they go on a massive rampage. And this was on the 16th of Iyar of the year 66. And Jewish property is plundered. 3,600 Jews are massacred. And even the moderates were hurt. And he also then, at that point, Flores afterwards then demands that the soldiers who committed all these atrocities are given some respect at the temple. And again, this infuriates the Jews. And finally, the population is able to push him out of the city. And Flores is actually removed from office at this point. As he's leaving, he kind of lets the Gentiles of Caesarea know that it was the Jews who are really causing all the problems for them as well. And of course there is a major attack by the Greeks of Caesarea, killing 20,000 Jews. So now we have Agrippa is brought in, and King Agrippa is there, and I mean he's there, but he kind of gets involved, and he tries to get the Jews from stop rebelling, and he tries to explain to them, don't you know that that no nation has ever been able to defeat the Roman Empire? What are you doing? But the rebels outnumber the moderates, and Agrippa is kicked out of Jerusalem. In response to that, remember, every action is a reaction, and in response to that, Agrippa sends in 2,000 soldiers to put down the resistance. Just to give you a timeline, this is the same time that Menachem raids and takes Masada, and there's that Eleazar, the captain of the temple, who is also Ben Hananiah, he's also the high priest's son. He convinces the priests that the sacrifices to the empire and to the emperor should be stopped, and they agree. That action of stopping the sacrifices was really not a major thing, but it was a major act of rebellion. And Josephus writes that it laid the foundation of the war with the Romans. So, okay, so Agrippa has his 20,000 soldiers, and there's massive mayhem going on. It's unclear who is in charge. In fact, each group wants to lead the people. This leads to massive anarchy. There's growing unrest in Jerusalem. Priests and those who are against the revolt are going to the upper city. Hanan ben Hanan, or Ananas ben Ananas, he begins to recruit fighters for his side, for the moderate side, and he incites the people to go up against the zealots, who they themselves, the zealots, are robbing people, and they're using the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, as their base of operation. The zealots learn that Ben Hanan was preparing a battle, and so they start going on an offensive, and they're attacking everywhere. The rebels took over the Temple Mount. and the lower city, and Hanan ben Hanan is like in the upper city. And so for 7 straight days, they're all fighting each other. They're fighting with stones, rocks, arrows, spears, swords. It's getting kind of nasty out there. Eventually, the zealots retreat to the inner court of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and 6,000 of Ben Hanan's men are basically in the outer court. On Tu B'Av that year, it says we're moving along from Iyar now to Av, into the year 66. The Sicarii get into the upper city, they take it over, they burn the buildings. That's when they burn the promissory notes, the banknotes. And Menachem, who is the leader of the Sicarii, is a ruthless man. And he forces his way their way all the way through until they finally take. Oops, wait a second, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, and here you can see different areas, and they finally get to Herod's palace where the moderates were, and he gives the moderates a little bit of time to flee, and those who don't get out in time, he kills. In addition, he also captured Hananiah, the high priest, and his brother, and he killed them. Now this led to Eleazar ben, the son of Hananiah, it's recorded that he says, "What's going on? We have replaced one tyrannical authority, which was the Romans, with another tyrannical authority, which is Menachem." And their goal now is to try to stop Menachem. And Menachem then, he dresses up in royal garments, I guess priestly robes, I believe that's what it is. And he goes to the temple to do the sacrifice at the temple. And at that point, the zealots capture him and execute him. That's at the time that it's just at that time that his relative Eleazar ben Yair flees to Masada and takes people with him then. So there are a couple of Eleazars here. So Eliezer, I think, the son of Hananiah, and all the other the other rebels are now are taking control of Jerusalem. We have the Antonia fortress, the upper city, Herod's fortress. They're taking different parts of the city. Now, so every action has a reaction. So Rome responds, and Cestius Gallus of who was the Roman governor of Syria, is now to come in, and he's coming in with 40,000 soldiers. Let's see. Okay. Yes, 40,000 soldiers, and on his way to Jerusalem, he burns down city after city. He's marching through the Galilee. He's quelching out rebellions. He's going to all these places, and 8,400 Jews are lying dead in his wake. Cestius arrives in Jerusalem, and he's offered to negotiate. He's outside the third wall. And he's offered to negotiate with the rebels, and Cestius rejects this. His job is to come in and put out a rebellion. He's not interested in any negotiations, and he begins to attack the walls. Now the thing is, Cestius doesn't have any battering equipment with him. He doesn't have any of his major siege equipment, and so he and his soldiers are there trying to break through. And the rebels, who are not very well trained, they're able to resist the Romans. And Cestius thinks this is just a minor rebellion. I'm going to go back to Beit Haron. I'm going to get our equipment. For some reason, the equipment didn't get past Beit Haron. He's going to go back to Beit Haron, get the equipment, and he's going to go and then come back. When the rebels see that the Roman soldiers are basically they're leaving, The rebels are so emboldened, like, wow, we did it, we chased them away. And not only are they emboldened to continue to defend the city of Jerusalem, but they actually chase after Cestius's army, and they chase after the Roman soldiers all the way to Beit Horon and even beyond. In the end, the Romans lost 5,300 foot soldiers and 400 mounted soldiers. They lost 6,000 troops in this attempt to put down the protest of the Jews. And this was a huge success for the Jewish rebels, but perhaps it was a false sense of security, because they thought that they actually could stand up against the Roman army. The rebels also got a lot of siege equipment, because once they chased the Romans beyond Beit Horon, that's where all the siege equipment was, and they took it. So that's how the rebels got a lot of more equipment. This victory also changed the attitude of a lot of the locals who were not affiliated, the Jerusalemites, who viewed the rebels they were now more impressed by them, and they supported their endeavors. I guess the minimum we could say is they were less inclined to agree with the moderates' point of view. Okay, so at this time, the rebel leaders realized it's only a matter of time that the Roman forces are going to come back with greater military, and they begin actually to work a little bit together. And there's still a lot of infighting that's going on, but one of the things they do is raise the height of the third wall, and they also decide that they're going to mint coins. Now, minting a coin is an act of independency, and it's a political act. It's an act to show autonomy, and it's an act to say that we are not under your yoke. So they were going to do it. The coins that had been being used at that time was the Tyrrhenian shekel. Now, this Tyrrhenian shekel was needed because it was part of the Machasita shekel that Jews had to pay at the Beit HaMikdash. Let me explain. It says that we know from the Torah we have to pay we have to pay tribute to the temple, a Machasita shekel. Everybody has to pay for it. So the rabbis realized that the only coin that really is the most silver in it was the Tyrrhenian minted shekel. The Roman in Rome minted a coin also, but that was only 80% silver, whereas the Tyrrhenian coin was 94% or more silver. So they were using this coin to be used at the Beit HaMikdash, and they were using it all so if you take a look at this coin, it's very interesting because it has the likeness of a Phoenician god, Melkart, who I understand was considered to be the son of Baal, and it had on the other symbols, and says the holy symbol of Tyre. So the Jews decide that they are going to actually mint coins, and the coins are dated from year 1, which is 66, till year 5, which is the year 70. And they changed the look. They're not going to use the Roman or the Tyrian symbols. They're certainly not going to use a symbol of a pagan to be on their coins, the coins that they use when they go worshiping to Hashem. So they have symbols of the land of Israel, the pomegranate, and other items, and they also put on the holy city of Jerusalem instead of the holy city of Tyre. Of course, they also put on Lecherut Zion, for the freedom of Zion. Okay, so we have this is all going on. Now, Nero has to respond. There's major rebellion going on in Jerusalem at this time, in Judea at this time. And Nero sends in Vespasian. And Vespasian comes in with 60,000 soldiers. And see the increments keep going up and up and up. And he is going, and he's being very, very successful until he gets close to Jerusalem. And it's at this point, 100,000 Jews in Judea have either been killed or sent into slavery. And with the fall of the Galilee, the Roman forces, more rebels are now running down into Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is getting to be the real hotbed, and the Roman Vespasian is on his way to get to Jerusalem. Just when he's about to get to Jerusalem, Nero commits suicide. And this throws Rome into a massive civil war. And Vespasian, he's everything, as always, whenever a Caesar dies, you don't do anything until you get orders from a new Caesar. So Vespasian just stops his assault. He's not going to do anything until he hears what the new orders are. So a new Caesar is appointed. A new Caesar, that Caesar's assassinated. Another one is appointed. 3 Caesars later, Vespasian is given the green light, and he is about to continue with his military assault on Judea when he gets word that he's now the new emperor, and his son Titus takes over. 3 Roman legions are brought in from 3 different areas, and 1 second. Okay. And 3 different areas. Meanwhile, the different factions that are going on here, the rebel factions are preparing for war, but they're still having a lot of internal bickering going on between themselves, how the temple should be run and how Judea should be run. One group of rebels tries to make an agreement with the Roman authorities, but the minority they're a minority opinion at this point. They're no longer the majority, they're minority. So many Jews of Judea have lost their houses, have lost their property, lost their farmland, and they now side with the Zealots. The Zealots are now beginning to execute anyone who seems to be collaborating with the Romans. You know, the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the rebels are calling them traitors. So we have Hanan ben Hanan, who is trying to stop these killings, and he gets a lot of he's trying to be the moderate voice now. He's trying to say, okay, guys, let's try to stop the killings and make peace between ourselves. People are motivated, and they successfully push those zealots into the temple courts. And in the area of the Beit HaMikdash, it's dripping with blood of the wounded. It has dead bodies there. There's so much internal fighting going on. A new rebel who had recently come down, his name was Yochanan of Giscala. He's a fighter from the Galil. He says to Hanan ben Hanan, listen, let me talk to them. I'm on your side, but let me talk to them. Maybe I can get them to stop the fighting. And so Hanan says, okay, go ahead. So this guy Yochanan, he goes up, and he tells the zealots, he says, you should know that Hanan ben Hanan is all for the Romans, and he's already ready to surrender to the Romans, and you can't trust him at all. And so that's like totally the opposite of what his job is supposed to be. And so Yochanan was so incredibly persuasive that the zealots said, you know what, why don't you be our leader? So Yochanan says, that's great, but guys, we need reinforcements. You know the Idumeans, right? The guys at Marasha. Let's contact them. These are the same ones who were converted by John Hyrcanus back in whatever, I don't know how many years before, right? So let's go get them, and let me ask them. Maybe they have 20,000 fighters that they can come and help us. So they were able to sneak out a message and get over to the Idumeans, and they came. But when the Idumeans came to Yerushalayim, the gates of the city were locked, and they're stuck out there. Why were they locked? Because Hanan had locked them. So once the gates were broken open and they were able to get through, there's a massive fighting going on. The Josephus details horrific, the horrific fighting that was the slaughter that was going on of Jew against Jew on that day. The rebels, the zealots kill rebel leaders, and Hanan ben Hanan is killed, and many others are killed. And so now you have Hanan ben Hanan is killed. He's the moderate voice of them all, and this Yochanan guy who has it's like murderous behavior tendencies, and the zealots having inappropriate control over the temple. All this leads a way for a new person to come in, and this is Shimon Bar Giora, who was hiding out in Mitzada, and he comes back and he wants to be control of everyone. So he talks to the Edomites, and he gets the Edomites on his side, and there's this fighting going on everywhere, and the fighting is continued up onto the Temple Mount, and I can't even imagine this. There's human blood dripping all over the Beit HaMikdash. There's wounded and dead, and they're still doing the daily sacrifices, which I just have trouble understanding and seeing. During this period of fighting, Yochanan and Shimon Bar Giora go into the warehouses where the food is kept, the extra grains, and they destroy all the storage houses. And then all of a sudden, something that they were totally not expecting occurs. And that is the morning of Erev Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan, and the Romans return. And it took the Romans to return for the Jewish forces to put aside their differences. But at that time, it's too late. And 5 months later, 5 months, and we have that the temple is destroyed on the 9th of Av, and Jerusalem is burnt down, and thousands were taken prisoners, and thousands were to be killed. And that's, thank you. I hope this helps get us into a appreciation of Tisha B'Av, and I don't know, to understand that we lost something very special, and we're very special people to keep mourning it even now. So
Judy,
yeah.
I have a question. When you told the Kamtza Bar Kamtza story that I know is in the Gemara, and
Yeah.
But is it thought to be a parable, just to explain to us about Sinat Chinam, and that's why the war started, or is it really thought to be a historical incident?
I think it's a true story, because they give the name of this Rav Zechariah ben Avkulis, who was the one who dictated that they. I imagine it's a real story. So
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Chava, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank